Okay, number 48 in section 6.4 is really just kind of a test of how well you know the unit circle. So your answer has to be in exact form as a fraction. So what you end up doing is just solving each of these four: sine pi over 6, cosine pi over 2, cosine pi over 6, and sine pi over 2. So if you know what the unit circle value is of sine pi over 6, it's going to make things a lot easier. So for example, sine pi over 6 you should know is a half, so we'll reduce that. Sine pi over 6 times cosine pi over 2, cosine pi over 2 is going to be 0. Cosine pi over 6 is square root 3 over 2, and sine of pi over 2 is 1. So what you get is, this cancels out, the right side becomes negative square root 3 over 2. So that's a simple one, 48, straightforward. Everything, if you looked at everything given to you, the pi over 6 and the pi over 2, they're both in quadrant 1, so there's no need to evaluate the quadrant sign. 51, on the other hand, is a little bit different. What we're going to look at here real quick, I'm going to draw up a unit circle, put our quadrants in. Now 3 pi over 4, I'm going to draw in, here's my 0, pi over 2, pi, and 3 pi over 2. So 3 pi over 4 puts us into the second quadrant. But also 5 pi over 6 does as well. So 5 pi over 6. So in other words, we need to keep in mind, when we evaluate sine 3 pi over 4, our reference angle is going to be, let me go back here, our reference angle is going to be sine of just pi over 4. Remember, you can just really just focus on the pi over your denominator, pi over 4. Here it's pi over 6, our reference angle. So once we have sine pi over 4, cosine of just pi over 6, and then cosine of pi over 4 sine pi over 6, then we can also evaluate the signage. So sine pi over 4 is square root 2 over 2. Cosine of just 1 pi over 6 is square root 3 over 2. And then cosine pi over 4 is also square root 2 over 2. And sine pi over 6 is a half. So we've evaluated our reference angles. Now we have to go back through and say, are any of these or all of these positive or negative? So anywhere we see sine we have positive in quadrant 2. Cosine's negative in quadrant 2. So I'm going to leave this alone as positive. This will be negative. This one here will be negative. So once we apply that, square root 2 times square root 3 is, with the negative sign, negative square root 6 over 4 minus, well, negative square root 2 times 1, we're going to end up adding square root 2 over 4. Now your answer technically is done here at this point, but again, we want one fraction, and we already have common denominator of 4. So we can just combine negative square root 6 plus square root 2 all over 4. A lot of times we don't lead with a negative coefficient, so you may see that rewritten as the square root 2 minus the square root of 6 all over 4. please do not combine square root of 6 and the square root of 2 in any form. There were a few people that would combine that and say that's the square root of 4 over 4, and then they got a half out of that. That is not a legal move in the world of mathematics. So your final answer, once I can erase that, maybe. Well, either way, our final answer is here. Square root 2 minus square root 6 all over 4. So again, this whole thing is made much easier, much more possible when you are able to have the unit circle memorized.